In this short video, I will talk about the differences between the systemic and the narrative perspective. But first I want to quote Scott Miller, the American therapist and researcher, who says that there are 3 points that characterizes the good and reflexive practitioner. First of all, you've got to know your theory and the philosophy and methods related to your theory. You've got to really be aware of the concepts that your theory and philosophy and the concepts, that what they imply. Secondly, it's important that you are willing to speak about the problems that you meet in your work. And the third point is that you have to be able to see the relationship between the problems you experience and the metaphor, the theory, and the philosophy, and the methods you're working from, so that you can see that there's a connection between the problems and your theory. So it doesn't matter whether you're following a psychoanalytic or cognitive or systemic or narrative a metaphor. You just got to be aware of your theory. And I think that those who call themselves systemic narrative or social constructionist narrative therapists make a big epistemological mistake. You don't call yourself Protestant, Catholic. You don't mix up the theology, so to speak. The history of the systemic approach is related to Gregory Bateson. He was interested in the pattern that connects. He was interested in the relationships, and that was a huge change from the individualistic focused psychoanalytic perspective to look at the relationships and the families, to look at what went on in the family. But the child was seen as a symptom, or the depressed wife was seen as a symptom of something that went on in the relationships. To me, it was a big liberation to go from the psychoanalytic perspective to the systemic perspective. I remember when I met first Gianfranco Cecchin and then Paul Watzlawick with his strategic therapeutic approach, and I felt that it was very successful a couple of years, but I felt that the person was lost in the systemic language, and later on also in the social constructionist language, because they're not just relationships, they're actually persons with feelings and intentions, and how can we understand this? So when I met the narrative perspective in 1987, it was introduced to me by Michael White, whom I invited to Denmark. I realized that what is the central concept here is the concept of power, the concept that Michel Foucault developed around power. So there's a difference between traditional power that is seen and that has a center, and differentiated from modern power, as Michel Foucault called it, the power that consists in norms, in invisible norms that we relate to and that we measure ourselves up to. And to understand the total concept of power has been a revolution in psychotherapy, I would say. So we are not coming in with our hypothesis, we are not coming in with our analysis, we are not coming with neutrality, but we are always producing something with our questions. So we have a lot of power in what we do. So I think that the concept of power is not a concept that I find in the systemic literature, in the systemic metaphor, nor in the social constructionist ideas. So they're focusing on relationships, and the enlightened aspect from narrative approach is that the narrative approach focuses on intentions and values and principles and hopes and dreams and dedication, and the concepts are based on on the narrative metaphor as introduced by Jerome Bruner, who speaks about the landscape of action and the landscape of consciousness. And Michael White said that we should go from what is known and familiar to what is possible to know through the kind of concept formation, the kind of scaffolding you can make from naming to effect to evaluation to justification of the evaluation, because people are not acting because of outside reasons. They're acting because of values and intentions, and we got to understand the values and the intentions related to the norms that come from the culture, from the society. So the narrative perspective opens up the possibilities for understanding the relationships, but not just in a family, in a closed system, so to speak, but we're always acting in a local culture, in a culture that's around us. And this culture has a lot of power and impact on the individuals in this. So to me, it's obvious that we cannot work within a systemic metaphor nor a social constructionist, because these are not just social constructions. The power is real, the actions are real, the concepts are real, but they are changeable. So we are always in the creation of our life, and it's always possible to create something new. Something new can always be done through our actions, as the philosopher Hannah Arendt speaks about. So I suggest that several of the systemic concepts got to be changed into more narrative concepts. So I have made here a list of central concepts in the movement from systemic to narrative thinking and practice. We've got to go from thinking about systems to thinking about narratives. We got to go from solutions to speak about values. We got to get away from speaking about ethics to speak about intentions. We got to get away from speaking about inner states to intentional states. We should not speak about hypotheses, but we should more have curiosity or the unpredictable. And if we speak about a therapist, we should speak about, I have written a therapist here, but I prefer to speak about the follower, the blind follower. The role of the therapist is to be the blind, and those that you're following should be the ones that tell you what they see. So we are not, the therapist should not be seen as the expert, but should be seen as the descended and blind. So instead of speaking about circularity of the problem, we should speak of externalizing of the problem. So when Bateson said, I have no concept of power, we should see power not as negative nor as positive, but as productive. So we should, whereas in the systemic and social constructionist concepts, they have no concept of subjectivity, we should speak about the subject as produced through processes. And we are not talking about a reflecting team, because that's imposing power on the ones that we talk about. We should speak about outsider witnesses or the witnessing processes. So what we are up to in working with families is the possibility for family members to become witnesses of one another, and to listen and never to discuss, but to feel with their heart and to be touched by what the others are saying and feeling. Because after all, the feelings are the central parts in our life, based on our values and the dilemmas and the conflict between values and norms as they are lived in ordinary life. So I will really emphasize that we cannot just use the metaphors or our theories without ethical reflections on the effect of what we're doing. So thank you for watching with this video. Bye bye.